We have a lot more to learn about the early Pueblo I period in the Durango, Colorado area.
There's a great curiosity about the past here. Who we are has a lot to do with our history, a lot to do with our past.
This is my home. These are my people. You know, these are my ancestors that were in there.
So these sites are a testament of our Hopi footprints on this earth, of where our ancestors came through, and they hold that spirituality.
Florida Mesa is a landform that's a few miles outside of town. It's well known for having lots and lots of Pueblo I habitation sites on it. This is one of those sites. We start by surveying a project area. You walk along, you look at the ground, and if you see artifacts or other evidence of a prehistoric site, you stop and you document the evidence. Later, before excavation, we sometimes do a geophysical survey, such as ground-penetrating radar or magnetometry. This might identify underground anomalies, which we can then investigate through excavation. We knew from the survey that the site's dated to the early Pueblo I period, about 1,200 years ago, give or take 50 years. We suspected that there were pit houses and surface rooms, which is what you would expect for sites in this area from that time period.
Of the 7 archaeological sites that will be impacted by this road construction project, 3 have turned out to have significant buried deposits. They have a great deal to tell us about previous lifeways, how people lived, what that meant.
When we start excavating at a site, we have an idea of where we think the best and most productive areas are going to be. It's kind of an educated guessing game.
We typically remove the overburden and we get down to within a few inches of the floor surfaces and the bench surfaces before we actually start to do more controlled excavation and intensive screening of all the deposits.
We'll start small. We'll put in a few 1x1 meter test units. We'll see what the stratigraphy looks like as we go down through the soil, what type of artifacts we're getting out.
We're kind of envisioning that probably either a similar group of people or perhaps kind of a large dispersed community occupying the ridgeline during the Pueblo I time period.
I think there's a misconception that archaeologists are only looking for artifacts like arrowheads and pots. Artifacts are important, but we really want to find the houses that people lived in, their fire hearths, storage pits, and other features, and ultimately to understand the spaces in which they lived.
Here we've got a very clear boundary of our house pit. You can really see the difference between where nobody was living. There's no charcoal or activity surface, and charcoal and everyday household activities happening.
One thing that we're doing as part of this project that we wrap into our mitigation process is public outreach, and in particular outreach to local tribal communities. Tribes, the Southern Ute Indian tribe, the Hopi tribe, and the Pueblo of Laguna have been our official consulting tribes.
In the past, archaeologists haven't always worked with Native American people on archaeological sites. On this project, we found that it really enhanced our ability to interpret the data, and it just added a lot to the project.
We're going to do things that are related to learning about the plants and the animals in the area and how those would have been important to people at sites, and what they could have done with all those plants and animals.
The significance of the Durango area was this is was our homeland that we shared with them, to the Ute people along with the Puebloans. The artifacts that we have, along with basket weaving, making of the water pouches that are sealed, were things that the Pueblos that lived here before shared with us when we used to cross paths within this area. We have people that can relate the stories to each other and try to share this knowledge of what we know.
The core Hopi values are respect, reciprocity, stewardship, and community. And so we don't see community just as a community of people, it's a community of all life. And with our ceremonies, they relate to all those and they pray for everything. It's not just about us or our community or our people, it's about all life, from the insects to the birds to the trees to the plants, because everything has a purpose and everything is connected.
Archaeologists need to work more with tribal members and especially tribal elders, because a lot of the information you're trying to find out is with the elders.
We know these things, we know the trails, we know the sites. Everything has a story.
Having these historic ties, these descendant communities still attached in the Southwest, makes it a much more robust archaeology.
You're learning that it's not just about sites, it's about landscapes, it's about whole uses. It's about how it fits together into this larger perspective where the past is somehow connected to the present and this particular point in space is somehow connected to the larger landscape.
Four Corners region contains the densest concentrations of archaeological sites in the entire United States. There's still so much left to learn here, even after a century of research. The knowledge gained from archaeology here tells us not just about ancestral Puebloan people, but can also give insights into ancient farming cultures all around the world. Pueblo I period was a really transformative time because it was the time when people in the northern Southwest became fully committed to farming. Before that, they were only partially committed to farming, but by the Pueblo I period, their entire lifeway and economy was based on farming. Maize, corn, was at the center of the Pueblo world.
So this is carbonized maize cob fragment.
Corn right there.
Part of why farming catches on and why it takes off is literally farmers are overpopulating landscapes, and they are pushing hunter-gatherers out and creating a farming culture that takes over the better part of the world. They are totally changing their lifeways. They are becoming, in some ways, a new people.
Modern-day Puebloan descendants continue to have maize as the foundation of their culture, religion, and foodways.
So this corn cob could be 1,200 years old.
As contract archaeologists, we almost never dig entire sites, but instead target specific areas of sites that are threatened by a project. For example, on this project, we could only excavate inside the project right-of-way where the highway was being constructed. It's always possible that we might miss something important that's outside of the areas where we can work, but that's almost always true of any archaeology.
Contract archaeology contributes far more to the historical record and the prehistoric record than universities do, simply because of the amount of projects that come to us and the speed at which we can excavate and turn projects around so that construction can go through. I mean, let's face it, we have to build highways, we have to build pipelines, we have to build transmission lines simply so we can live. So getting all of the information and the data out before these things go in, putting them into the record for other researchers to use, that's vastly important. We wouldn't know half of what we know, for example, in the Southwest, if it wasn't for contract archaeologists.
This is a circular pit house. You can see the outline of the walls are in this half circle shape. The other half is under the road. A pit house it's a house that they have dug into the ground. It's their house, it's where they live, and it just happens to be in a pit-type shape. The adobe is from this surface room block, which would have been a series of connected rectangular rooms down a line to each other. They could have been used for work areas. We found lots of groundstone, manos and metates, that they would have used for grinding corn or other plant materials. We have found lots of pottery in these surface room blocks as well that they may have been using for storing grains or seeds or corn. So that it's really indicative that this area was the workspace for the house.
What we saw when we got on the site was kind of a low mound where we suspected there was the remnants of a room block. And then within the mound, there was a depression. The depression indicated the presence of a pit house, but it didn't indicate the size of the pit house. It's definitely one of the largest in the region, certainly not common. Typically, the interior walls of the pit house would have been covered with a plaster made from a fine clay or mud. We still have, in quite a few areas, remnants of that plaster. And here's an example of some that actually has small fingerprints impressed into it.
With the circular shape and this very large bench, you may be looking at something more like what we think of as community structures, where people gather into a place like this. It may be associated with a family or a household or a couple of households, but it also may be actually integrating a larger community around here for different kinds of ceremonies and events and sharings during feasting.
These pit houses were so large that you could probably have fit 50 or more people in them at one time. And these special events were probably attended by people from neighboring hamlets and villages. There were burned timbers everywhere. Behind the wing walls.
Yeah.
Over here where we're standing.
So if this house had a very special meaning to people, what they may do is actually ceremonially close it by destroying it.
We're at structure 4, which is the northernmost structure we have on the site, kind of what we are envisioning as the hamlet, a small village. This structure has had a lot of evidence of post-occupational use, and after it was abandoned, people came back and made use of this structure several other times. We'll have to be careful with parsing the spatial and horizontal extent of that and figuring out which dates to which occupation. So it adds a lot of complexity, a lot more head scratching, and a lot more archaeological data that needs to be collected.
So we have a metate here that's been placed upright, close to the wall, and there's actually a whole line of them here. Well, we don't know yet if they're all metates, but they're large stones like this laying up against the wall, and at least a couple of them so far we know are metates. So it's just kind of interesting that they're all in this line.
This is the first site that I've ever worked on where they have brought in volunteers, like younger youth or student volunteers from those tribes to come out and help with the excavation on the tribes as well.
This is a good workout.
We hired Applied Archaeology International to work with the tribes to create an outreach program that would involve tribal elders, youth, and aspiring native archaeologists.
I think there's not a lot of archaeologists, anthropologists in my area, but yeah, serving as an example is something that I definitely value and I think is important.
I'd like to see our youth get involved with archaeology through our natural resources departments, cultural departments. That way they can better their understanding of our past history and our ancestry.
Young tribal members can learn a lot working with archaeologists. They'll understand that we shared this land here with the Puebloans. It was their homeland before they left this area.
That was coming up.
If you haven't gone to Arctic.
Just having the opportunity to not only provide these skills and jobs for tribal youth and community members, then we have a seat at the table.
What is this backside of the boat?
Archaeology is a social process, and it is about getting kids onto cultural places and ways to feel that place and take pride in their history and their heritage. It's not an ancient place, it's not a static place, it's alive. It's alive with spirit.
As archaeologists, we sometimes become so immersed in the artifacts and the data and the science that we tend to forget that these were people who were born and had families and had vibrant lives. Their descendants are still here, and they have a lot to teach us. I have been especially struck by times when a Native person will look at something that we revealed through excavation, and they'll see in it a spiritual dimension that we're not trained to see. Those are the kind of insights that a Native archaeologist or consultant can contribute to archaeology.
When tribal youth are going to look at a site, right, they're going to look at it way differently than a regular archaeologist, because they're not looking for material culture. They're looking at the plants, they're looking at the trees, looking at the birds that are around here. What are these things that we use? What's significant about that? There's plants that are spiritual plants that you use at certain times of the year. There's medicine. So I think just the viewpoint can shift when you work together, because it's about everything. Everything's connected.
Where's that at? There's a lot of history, a lot of knowledge and wisdom. Those ways were sacred, and they are sacred.
Throughout this project, when we found human remains, which we found at several sites, not just this one, we have been in contact through CDOT with cultural representatives of the Southern Ute tribe to get insight into how to best remove these remains in accordance with their traditional beliefs and practices. Based on this project, we can't leave them in place, which is always the preferred treatment.
The individuals ranged in age from fetal to children to young adult to people in their 40s and 50s who would have probably been considered quite elderly. There is evidence that some of the individuals died violently, but this isn't unusual for that time period in this area, and similar evidence has been seen at other sites. There's also evidence for debilitating disease where somebody must have been taking care of that person.
Human remains are probably one of the most serious things, I think, that we deal with in archaeology because they're people. And to the tribes that currently live in this area, they are the descendants of these people. It isn't just scientific. There's an emotional element to it as well. There's a connection to it that we need to be aware of and that we need to handle respectfully.
They were excavated and treated according to the protocol of the tribes. They will be analyzed by a bioarchaeologist here at our lab and then repatriated to the tribes for reburial.
Archaeologists is not compatible with our Ute ways. This is something that we don't do. We do not disturb these areas. And if we do find them, we leave them alone.
You know, this is awesome that you record these things and keep them, but also you have to understand the pain it is to just dig those things up in the first place. So it's finding that common ground and that understanding and just respect. You know, this is someone's grandpa, this is someone's grandma, this isn't another piece of material culture. You know, just having that understanding, I think, is really important for just the basic foundation of going into this work.
Where we share traditional values about the spirituality of these sites that are found and the archaeologists dig up, and we have a spiritual ceremony that takes care of everything. Everything that's found was used for a purpose and not to be removed unless a certain ceremony has been taking place so that their spirits remain where they're at and do not follow us home. And we can continue working without what we would say interference.
From the very start of the project, all of the organizations involved have worked hard to balance the needs of the project, the many values of cultural resources, and respect for tribal heritage. We're grateful to have been given the opportunity to collaborate with the tribes in an inclusive and respectful way while also doing good science.
Everything's been coming in from pottery to manos and metates to projectile points, faunal remains, macrobotanical. We have a small portion of everything that these people who live there used throughout their time there. We have roughly 50,000 artifacts in the lab. We think that the artifacts span several hundred years. We won't really know that until they come back from all the analysts that we'll send them out to. We learn so much from the past. We want to know how other people lived, and also why did their lifestyles change? What can we tell about the future of our own lives and how we're going forward in civilization? Everything builds on everything, and the more that we can understand about the past, then the better off we're going to be in the future.
Dendrochronology, or tree ring dating, is a crucial tool for southwestern archaeologists because it can give you the actual years when people lived at the site. For example, at the Honey Tree site, we were able to learn that the Big Pit House was either built or remodeled in the year AD 759. We also learned that at the Florida Ridge site, at least 2 pit houses were built in the year 781. The ceramic analyst was able to determine that the pottery assemblages were types that were manufactured in the Durango area and the upper San Juan River region between about 750 and 850 AD. The vast majority of the pottery assemblage was grayware, utilitarian pottery that was used for cooking and food storage, but there were also decorated serving bowls, seed jars, small ritual vessels, and redwares that were imported from southeast Utah. These communities almost certainly interacted with each other on a regular basis. They probably came together to trade, to exchange marriage partners, to hold ceremonies, and they certainly were important to one another in terms of the economy. There was a lot happening here 1,200 years ago. The information we gained from excavating these sites adds to the broader existing knowledge about the early Pueblo I period in the Durango area and across the Four Corners region. And this is important because every site is part of that bigger picture, and every piece of data tells us something about the world as it existed at that time.
For those materials excavated by alpine archaeology, they'll come here and this will become their permanent home. Part of the mitigation for that archaeological project would be that those artifacts and archives would have an ongoing research purpose long after the excavations are done. So maps, reports, photographs, field notes, artifacts will be available for researchers in perpetuity. One of the real powerful opportunities with artifact collections like this is future research. We have no idea of knowing what kind of technology awaits in the future. As technologies change and methods change, these artifacts will remain here for future researchers.
40 years ago, when I became an archaeologist, we really had no contact with descendant peoples of the sites we were looking at. And I think as we become much more engaged with Pueblos and tribes in the work that we do, it's enlivened and made much more human, the kinds of work that I do, the kinds of questions that I ask, and vice versa. It's been a remarkable change over 40 years for me. I've become a better archaeologist.
When you bring elders, youth, and archaeologists all together, everyone is benefiting because you're learning from each other, but also you're paving the way for this new era of archaeology, which is including the indigenous people that are still here.
I really believe that the future of archaeology in this country and across the world depends upon including indigenous people in the study of their own past, both from the perspective of Western science and from their own beliefs and traditions. Both of these paths to knowledge are important. That is why it is so critical to train native archaeologists